Welcome to Bahá'í Books and Authors, a podcast which introduces to you writers and the works they've penned related to the Bahá'í faith. We'll explore the inspiration, the process, and the stories behind their work. I'm your host, JoAnn Grammer. This podcast is produced by World Unity Media, which also produces Bahá'í audiobooks. The teacher was heading his way, and not in a good way. Richard Abercrombie was in trouble again. He was in his classroom and had no way to get past his teacher, so he headed for the window. He figured it was about a 12-foot drop. He jumped and rolled with a fall. He escaped without injury, and his first thought was business as usual. He avoided school for the rest of the day. In fact, Ricky was skipping school frequently and at one point was carrying a gun. He even tried to use it 3 times, but each time something intervened. As he describes his life in those days, he was headed for jail or an early grave, until by chance he heard about the Bahá'í faith at a birthday party at his friend Helen's house. In this episode, we'll discuss Crossing the Line, a memoir of race, religion, and change, co-written by Richard Abercrombie and JoAnn Borovicka. This is an incredible story of the life of a young black man growing up in the Deep South, surrounded by racism and many avenues for trouble. I met up with Ricky and JoAnn, a prolific writer herself and an artist, to discuss their book. I'm so excited to speak with both of these guests today. I've read the book, of course, and it is a delight. There's power to it. There's sweetness to it. Let's jump right into asking questions to find out more about this wonderful, wonderful book, Crossing the Line. Ricky, I want to start with you. At 14, you really were going down a road to delinquency. What brought that about? Because you came from a big and loving family. What set you on that path?
It started out with me not being allowed to leave the basement area of our church where there was Sunday school and to attend the regular church service because I didn't have on a coat. Tabernacle was the second largest black church in Greenville. It was like you might want to say was somewhat upscale. And I just thought that was ridiculous that I couldn't attend the service without a coat being on. When I wanted to retrieve my coat, which I had left in my father's car, and when I went to retrieve it, the car was locked. I just went back and tried to get my father, but he was in the meeting. They told me he couldn't be interrupted. I just went out and sit on the steps of the church. I thought that all this was ridiculous, and I just started turning away from religion.
In addition to turning away from religion, you were cutting class. You said you were disrespectful to your teachers, also to your parents, that you began drinking alcohol, and at one point you even got a gun. How did that influence your life?
Well, I had sort of turned away from everything that was good, and I was just being delinquent and just doing whatever I wanted to do. But I still knew that there was a creator, but I couldn't accept what I had been taught about God. So being delinquent didn't really bother me at the time because I just felt that I should be able to do whatever I wanted to do, regardless of the consequences.
So here you are living your life at 14 in this way, and then all of a sudden things changed.
I was invited to a birthday party, and unknowingly, they had a Bahá'í speaker. I had the address, and at the time, I walked just about every place that I went. And I realized that I was going into a white neighborhood, and it was dark. And at that time, back in the 60s, black people did not enter white neighborhoods after sunset. And when they did go, even if it was daylight, you went to the back door. Well, as I approached this house, it was after sunset, and to get to their back door, you had to go down a couple houses and take the driveway that led to the back of the house. So I went and knocked on the front door. I was let in, and then as I entered, I was late getting there. And this white man was trying to tell this group of black teenagers about God and religion. And I felt that no white person had any business trying to tell black people about God. So I just cut him off. I can't tell you anything that he said, but this lady, Junie Faley, she was the one that had arranged for to be a speaker at the birthday party. Helen was hired as a babysitter to help watch her grandchildren. And Junie had met her because Sundays she would attend a black church. And so she met Helen there. And Helen's father belonged to a denomination that didn't believe in celebrating birthdays. The only birthday that they would celebrate was that of Christ. It was her 16th birthday party, and the sweet 16, that's, a magical age. And Junie told her, since you can't have a birthday party at your house, you can have one and invite your friends to come here. My attention at the birthday party was on Junie because she was just so excited to have about 20 kids sitting down in her living room listening to the teachings of the Baha'i faith. Couldn't imagine what it was that she was so happy about. But, that was it.
So then over the course of the following months, even though you were reluctant at this first time to hear anything about religion, you did continue to go to some informal, informational gatherings, Baha'is call firesides, to learn more about it. What really struck you about the Baha'i faith?
One of the school teachers had noticed how my behavior had gotten because I had had an altercation with her husband that was one of my school teachers as well. And she just couldn't figure out why was it that she had taught also some of my brothers and sisters, and they were upstanding students, and she couldn't figure out what's wrong with this one, So she asked me to be into a class play. And she realized that in grammar school, I did a lot of plays and was quite noticed for it. In the meantime, Junie was sending out postcards inviting me to come to another Baha'i meeting. I had no intentions of ever going to another Baha'i meeting. That particular night, during the dress rehearsal, something came over me and told me I had to go to that Baha'i meeting. I'd thrown the postcard away, but I remembered the street that it was on. So during dress rehearsal, I told my teacher that I had to leave. And she said, you can't leave now because this is the dress rehearsal. And I said, I know. I said, but I have to go, but I will come back. So out of disgust, she just turned and walked away. And I left the school. I remember the street that it was on. It wasn't very far from my school. So I walked down to that street. I didn't know whether to go right or left, but I decided to go right. And as I walked down that street, I saw a lot of cars parked in front of a house. I went and knocked on the door and asked if that's where the Baha'i meeting was. This time, it was a black lady. And I guess God said, well, if you don't want to listen to white people, I'll see the black ones. So as she began talking, during my studies at school, we had been studying world history, and I had learned that there were millions of Buddhists in the world, millions of Hindus, millions of Muslims, of course, millions of Jews. I thought there has to be something in this. That began to change my life at that particular moment.
What looked different in your life after you started learning more of what is this Baha'i faith? What is this progression of teachings through the divine teachers that we have from age to age, progressive revelation?
It had a very large impact on me because I realized that it wasn't God that I didn't believe in. I just couldn't accept what I had been taught. I felt like a thirsty person out on the desert, and I came upon this ocean of water.
That's a wonderful story. So, JoAnn, what made you say after you met Ricky, absolutely, I want to be involved in writing this book?
Oh, it was a wonderful opportunity. First of all, Ricky's a great storyteller. I could sit and listen to him for hours, tell about various adventures and things that happened. And so for the opportunity of getting his stories down in print, I really jumped at the chance. I'm also very curious, so I wanted to know more about exactly how this came about.
The story unfolds so beautifully. Let's talk about the title. What is the meaning of Crossing the Line?
Originally, I had titled those pages that I had written is Rebel at the Party.
He still wants that to be the title.
The significance is a Black teenager going into a white neighborhood after sunset and going to the front door. So it was crossing the line from my neighborhood into a white neighborhood. And that began a whole new chapter of my life.
JoAnn, this must have been a really interesting project for you. You were friends with the family. Undoubtedly, you learned things that you hadn't heard before. Did you have any aha moments when you were doing this project?
One of the characters that I learned about that I hadn't known before was a woman named Grace Vonderheit. She had since passed on, but she was in the very early Baha'i community in Greenville. I was really touched by her story, and I'll tell you why. Grace was from the Northeast, from a very aristocratic family. Sometime in her life, she joined the Baha'i faith, and she came to Greenville specifically to help the community grow, the Baha'i community. And she was very courageous. She was a socialite, and often the newspapers, they follow socialites. She'd tell them and allow them to have in the social section, Grace Vonderheit is going to Lou Helen Baha'i School this weekend to do this, that. At the time in the 50s, that was dangerous. It was dangerous associated with the Baha'is because the Baha'is were associated with integration. And it was for sure dangerous to be a prominent person involved in activities that were integrated. So that's how courageous she was. Now, when Ricky came to the faith, and many of his classmates did as well, suddenly the face of the Greenville Baha'i community became very different. It had been very much mostly white, elderly people. And with Rick and his friends, it was a very integrated group. Some of Rick's friends, and Rick as well, felt that Grace was prejudiced. She was hesitant about allowing them to ride in her car, and maybe attitude. In a Baha'i meeting at one point, the youth confronted her. They said, "We feel that you're prejudiced against us." Grace said, "Yes, I am prejudiced, but I'm trying to do something about it." The kids loved her. And so when I first got this story, okay, this woman is prejudiced, but you love her so much. I probably asked Rick, I don't know how many, 10 times. Now, Rick, tell me again, why did you love Grace Vonderheit so much? And he explained to me more than once. He said, because she was honest.
It's very powerful, as you say, that she had the honesty, the presence of heart, there was trust, that she was going to say this to this group of youth and that they accepted it and could say, she's working on it.
There's more to that story, but you'll have to read the book.
Okay. It has been a joy to speak with both of you. Thank you so much for sharing all that you shared with us today. Crossing the Line, a memoir of race, religion, and change by Richard Abercrombie and JoAnn Borovicka. It's available on Bahá'íBookstore.com or wherever you get your distribution services. Subscribe or follow Baha'i Books and Authors with your chosen podcast platform. This podcast is produced by World Unity Media.